Hi, my name is Dylan Freeman. This will be my video reflection for my professional shadowing experience that I had at a local CrossFit gym. So ultimately, we'll go over a brief overview of the gym, some of my takeaways, connect these things that I saw back to the concepts that we learned in class, and provide some details regarding how I'll potentially be able to use this in my professional career going forward. So the gym that I worked with is called CrossFit Old School. It's located in downtown Bowling Green. It's owned by Coach Erin, which is one of the coaches that I worked with. She opened it about 15 years ago and has been conducting CrossFit sessions ever since. And more recently has adopted the High Rocks programming as well for members to take part in. Another coach that I shadowed was Coach Donna, and together they were the ones that I was looking over, as well as participating in those sessions as well. So ultimately, they do take a multidisciplinary approach to fitness with CrossFit and High Rocks. So you'd see things like powerlifting, Olympic lifting, gymnastics movements, and a lot of endurance-based training. And overall, their goal is to help their members become very well-balanced and well-rounded athletes overall. The actual space that they work in, it's mostly open space. Conducting group sessions, it's kind of required, but you'll also see equipment like barbells, kettlebells, medicine balls, pull-up bars, rings, and ropes. So all sorts of equipment for those functional movements, as well as things like rowers and ski ergs for those endurance-based things. And then one thing that I really noticed in my time in the gym was the community atmosphere that was present. It kind of felt like a big family that was there. All of the members, whether they were newer or whether they had been there for a long time, they all knew each other very well. They all had great rapport with each other, and they always were encouraging each other in their workouts. But ultimately, continuing on, I'll provide some of my takeaways from my experience, as well as connect those things that I saw back to the concepts that we learned in class. So my first kind of takeaway or observation from my time in the gym was just how diverse the members were, specifically in their backgrounds as it relates to fitness. Some members were coming from, more traditional resistance training programs like push-pull legs, simple stuff like that. Even Erin, the owner, said that that's kind of where she transitioned from. So that was kind of one background that I noticed was very common. And some people were completely new to exercise, and ultimately were just looking to get into something to improve their overall health and wellness, and were seeking that more community-based structure to help encourage and motivate them to achieve their goals. So ultimately, this really made it paramount to me that these coaches, or Coach Erin and Coach Donna, they must be knowledgeable of these backgrounds in order to tailor workouts and communicate effectively with all of their members based off of their previous experience. Something else I noticed was there was overall a pretty consistent structure for the classes themselves. So ultimately, both Erin and Donna, they typically would begin a class kind of welcoming everybody in, any sort of previous members, they chatted with them, asked them kind of about their personal lives and whatnot. And if there were any newer members, they would make sure to introduce those members and have everybody else introduce themselves to make sure that they knew that they were belonged there and were welcome. And then ultimately they would transition into some sort of educational component very briefly before the class started, oftentimes as it related to like nutrition and metabolism. Erin specifically was obviously very interested in the more science-based concepts as it relates to metabolism, and she would provide resources or just information about how people can help to better achieve their goals in their outside life by focusing on nutrition. And then something else that I got to observe was actually a newbie class. So this kind of ties back into the newer members again. Donna, I watched her conduct a session for people who were potentially interested in joining the gym and getting into CrossFit or High Rocks. Ultimately, she started the session by once again getting to know everybody, and then provided a very brief but still detailed speech kind of on the goals of the gym, what they can expect from CrossFit and High Rocks and things like that. And then after that, she provided them with a very simple workout to do, just to kind of expose them to the types of movements or the kind of intensity they can expect from these workouts. But this definitely showed that buy-in and getting people into fitness and getting people to want to achieve their goals starts from that very beginning session and their very first exposure to something like CrossFit or High Rocks. And then I also kind of briefly mentioned how the community was in the gym, but both of the coaches that I shadowed, they always made sure that they kept the environment positive. Once again, they always knew everybody's name, and if it was a new member, they made sure that they were working on remembering it. And then specifically when I actually worked out on my last session, I really noticed just how important it is for those coaches to provide adequate encouragement in order to complete a workout while keeping things like form in mind. And then I also felt the encouragement from the other members themselves. They had kind of seen me around quite a while, and I finally participated in a workout, and they were there as well to encourage me and congratulate me on completing that workout. In addition, the kind of final thing that I noticed from the coaches was their focus on technical movements or technical coaching. So ultimately, they would always make sure that they were walking around, especially when it was like a bigger class. They would be observing, making sure that people are using correct form to make sure that they're getting the maximum benefit out of the workout while ensuring that they're not going to injure themselves. But ultimately, it definitely made me realize how important it is to consider that aspect of it when you're working with a lot of people, and not to let form diminish even if you are working with a lot of people. But ultimately, I'll go ahead and transition into connecting the things I saw back into some concepts that we learned in class. So we talked about quite a few different principles as it concerns strength and conditioning in class. Ultimately, two that I noticed a lot of times in the gym were the principle of specificity and the principle of individualization. So when it came to specificity, you could see that coming out in the two different programs that they have, High Rocks and CrossFit. High Rocks, ultimately, the ultimate goal would be to participate in a High Rocks race where there are different stations for functional movements as well as a lot of running. So the training that was being done in the gym matched that. So a lot of these exercises were a lot longer intervals for things like rowing or running. Also, different functional movements were performed, such as like broad jumps. So things like that. Training, just making sure that it's focused on endurance and being prepared for what the race would demand. CrossFit was maybe a little bit broader. The ultimate kind of goal, even though CrossFit does have competitions, its main goal is just kind of an overall physical preparedness and just overall fitness. So ultimately, that was achieved through a wide variety of movements. So things like Olympic lifting, gymnastics movements, in addition to just general conditioning. So both of these different styles kind of reflect the adaptations that the athlete is seeking from a result of training. And then when it came to individualization, coaches were definitely aware of that. So like I said, there were a wide variety of people with different training backgrounds. So ultimately that leads to the need for individualization based off of individual ability. So a lot of the different movements, there were scaled versions, so you could reduce the weight or reduce the number of reps that were done. Ultimately, there were also different modifications that could be done to make a movement either easier or harder. And then just overall intensity could be varied based on one's personal goals and ability. So if somebody who is more experienced wants to be a little more intense, they have the ability to do so. Or somebody that is just getting into CrossFit, they can scale it back a little bit. But ultimately, these things, they match what we learned in class. So even when people are doing like the same workout, the coaches, they must be able to adapt that training to fit a person's kind of individual abilities or needs. So ultimately, I can definitely use this experience going forward in my professional goals. This showed me just how important the people side of coaching is. So ultimately, I can use this in any sort of leadership position that I have going forward, understanding that creating buy-in from people is based on the relationships that you build with them, and ultimately being able to lead them to achieve their goals is very dependent upon how you interact and create those positive relationships with them. But ultimately, I really enjoyed this experience and will be looking forward to being able to utilize what I learned in the future.